Hello again. So, for today and for Friday, I'm going to be putting up lectures about large stretches of Descartes' Meditations. Now, the reason why we're focusing on Descartes' Meditations so much is because he lays the groundwork for a view of human nature that I think lots of folks buy into, and that we'll be criticizing throughout the rest of the summer term here. So, as you recall, on Monday, one of the lectures I posted described what I'm calling the package view of human nature. Right? So human nature, human minds are disembodied. Human beings are rational. Human beings are free, and that humans are asocial or agendered / agendered. So I take these ideas about human nature to be grounded in Descartes. So I want to take Descartes as the locus. I guess it's sort of a philosophical foundation for sort of the philosophical locus for where these ideas come from. And with Plato, as we saw in our last set of lectures, providing a broad background as to the split in reality, right? So you'll recall that Plato says that there's a distinction between the realm of the forms and the concrete world in which we live. So we see obviously a split in reality. And Descartes embodies that split by dividing between the mental world, or our mental lives, and our physical bodies. So let's get into the first meditation. So a little bit of background here. So Descartes is a 16th century, late 16th century, 17th century philosopher. So he's working around the time of Francis Bacon. Right? So Francis Bacon, for those of you who know your history of science, is one of the first to clearly articulate the scientific methodology that we now know as the scientific method, right? Where you come up with a hypothesis, you do some experiments, and then you see if your hypothesis is right? And then you tinker with your hypothesis accordingly. Now, this is very different from the way that science was practiced previously, right, in the previous 1,000, 1,500 or so years. Previously, science was practiced following Aristotle, right? So Aristotle was a natural scientist and a philosopher. And he wrote a lot on biology, and he wrote a lot on things like astronomy, and all kinds of really cool stuff. And what ended up happening is that Aristotle was, so quick caveat here, this glosses over hundreds and hundreds of years of intellectual history. So I'm going to capture all this in about 20 seconds. So take this with a grain of salt, but it at least gives you a flavor of why Descartes is important. So what we find is scientific research leading up to Bacon and in his work is we find scientists appealing to Aristotle not just for method, right, but also for an authority on content. So if your findings conflicted with what Aristotle had written, well then it's going to be troublesome, right? Because Aristotle is taken as an authority not just on how to do science, but on what had entered the canon as knowledge, right? As definitive knowledge. And so what we find in Bacon is we find a methodology that prioritizes discovery over knowledge that was already part of the canon. Now, given that this is a new way of conceptualizing scientific research, what's needed is, are really philosophical foundations for it. And that's what we find Descartes providing. Right? In fact, if you happen to open up to the first paragraph of the Meditations, you'll say that he's trying to provide new foundations for the sciences. Right? So his goal here is to provide sure footing for scientific research. So you might think to yourself, why the hell do we need that? Well, we need it because we want to make sure that the things we're doing, the methods of discovery that we're using, actually link on to reality, right? That we're not just, that the things we're discovering about how the world works really does map onto an external world. Right? And so, in Descartes, we focus on our knowledge, right? So what do we know about the world? So, to really push this, he says, now what do I really know about the world? Now, when he says, what do I really know about the world, his criterion, his standard here is indubitability. So, quick background on this. When we think about claims to knowledge, right, we ask, when somebody says that they know something, there are certain standards we have, right? So if you ask me if I know that I'm going to win the lottery tomorrow, suppose I say I know I'm going to win the lottery tomorrow, and you ask me, how do you know that? Well, I have to have some pretty damn good evidence for you to believe that I know the winning lottery numbers, right? Maybe it's rigged, maybe I know the person who's pulling out the numbers, but in any case, I've got to have some really solid evidence to convince you that I know the winning lottery numbers. If I say, I know there's water in the cup, right? You're going to say to me, how do you know that? And I'm going to say, watch, sucker. Delightful water, right? It's wet, it's clear, and it tastes like water. And so all of that gives me good evidence for believing and for knowing that there's water in the cup. So, Descartes says, well, what's our standard for knowledge? When we say I know something, like what really are we saying there? For Descartes, to know something is to have undoubtable reasons for believing it. So the next question to ask is, what do we believe that is absolutely undoubtable? Now, when I say it's absolutely undoubtable, I mean you would be contradicting yourself. You'd be engaging in a logical contradiction if you were to doubt it. So, here's an example of something that is undoubtable. Everything in the world is either white or not white. Right? So again, everything in the world is either white or not white. So I've got my phone here, not white. I've got my cup here, that's white. I've got my pencil, not white. I've got my eraser, not white. I've got my sheet of paper, white. So everything in the world is either white or it's not white. If you say, well, it's gray, right? Or you say something really witty like that. Well, gray isn't white, so your gray object falls into the category of not white. So we see why this example is an example, or this example is an example of something that's absolutely undoubtable, because it provides two exhaustive and exclusive categories, right? White and not white. Right? These are exhaustive, these are exclusive. Everything we perceive falls into one of those categories. Here's another one. Everything is the same thing as itself. Or in other words, everything is identical to itself. So, here's an example of that. I've got my pencil here. I am not the pencil. You can see this because the pencil is very tiny, and I am not tiny. You also know this because I have a certain weight and a certain mass, and my pencil here, its mass and its weight are much smaller than mine. Another difference, I can talk. My pencil can't. So we have all these differences between me and the pencil. So we can ask ourselves, is there anything in the world that would be the very same thing as this pencil? That whatever is true of this pencil would be true of anything else? And the answer is going to be no. Now, you might have a pencil that looks just like this one, that weighs the same as this one. Right? Suppose, I don't have another pencil ready to hand. But suppose I did have another pencil that looked just like this one. Well, in that case, I'd have two pencils that look a lot alike, but they would be in different locations, right? One would be here, one would be here. So there'd be something true of one that's not true of the other, so they're not the same thing. So everything is identical to itself. That's another one of these things that's undoubtable. Here's some things that are doubtable. My cup is white. So you might say to yourself, well, why is that doubtable? Well, it's doubtable because perhaps you're hallucinating that it's white. Or perhaps since you're watching this via a webcam, maybe the sunlight and the webcam are doing wonky things to this, and it's actually gray. It appears to you as white. Or perhaps the fluorescent lights in my office are a little bit weird, and so they're making this beige cup look white. Here's another one. This book is about Plato. So how is that dubitable? How could you doubt that? Well, I mean, the front of the book says Plato, clearly. But perhaps while I wasn't looking, somebody very cleverly took the cover off of my Plato book and stuck it on, my book about Descartes or about David Hume, right, or of any other book I happen to have. So my belief that this book is about Plato, or rather is by Plato, is a dubitable belief, right? I could be mistaken about that. So what Descartes does in the first meditation is he, in a sense, codifies this insight, or like encapsulates this insight with his thought experiment of the evil demon. So the evil demon in this case is this all-powerful entity, right? This hypothetical all-powerful entity. And what it does is it consistently deceives us. At every turn, the evil demon is tricking us, right? So right now, I'm holding up a book. I think I'm holding a book in my hand, but maybe I'm not. Maybe the evil demon is deceiving me into thinking there's a book in my hand. Right now, I'm taking a sip of water. But maybe the evil demon is deceiving me. Maybe this isn't water. Maybe it's gin, and it just tastes like water. Or maybe there's nothing there at all, and the evil demon has manipulated my mind to make me think that there's water here, to make me think that I'm tasting water. So, the question then that Descartes asks is, given the possibility of an evil demon, given the possibility that I am currently massively deceived, that everything around me is, well, that my perception is wrong, right? Given that, what on earth can I know? And so that takes us into the second meditation, which we'll pick up with in the next